My name is Liam Davis. I just turned 18 4 months ago, and I thought becoming an adult meant finally having the freedom to make my own choices. Instead, it meant finally being old enough to discover that my mother had been planning to kill herself because of years of abuse from my father that I never knew was happening, and that sometimes the most important choice you can make is between saving someone's life and protecting a family secret that was slowly destroying the person you love most. I was supposed to be starting my freshman year at University of Washington in Seattle this fall, majoring in psychology with dreams of becoming a counselor who could help families work through their problems. Instead, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the King County Prosecutor's Office, giving my testimony for the case that would send my father to prison for 15 years and force me to rebuild my understanding of everything I thought I knew about my own family. My father, Dr. Marcus Davis, was a 45-year-old orthopedic surgeon who worked at Seattle Presbyterian Hospital and was considered one of the most respected medical professionals in our community. He earned over $400,000 a year, drove a BMW, lived in a $1 million house in the exclusive Magnolia neighborhood, and was known among our neighbors and his colleagues as a devoted family man who adored his wife and son. My mother, Catherine Davis, was 42 years old and had been a successful marketing executive before she married my father and decided to become a stay-at-home mother to focus on raising me and supporting his medical career. She was intelligent, kind, beautiful, and seemed to have everything that most women would want: a successful husband, financial security, a beautiful home, and the freedom to pursue her interests without worrying about money. To everyone who knew us, including me, the Davis family represented the American dream. We took elaborate vacations to Europe and Hawaii, lived in a house that was featured in Seattle Magazine's Home of the Year issue, and attended charity galas where my father was often honored for his contributions to pediatric orthopedics and his generous donations to children's hospitals. But underneath that perfect facade, my mother was living a nightmare that she had hidden from everyone, including her own son, for nearly 20 years. Growing up, I never saw any signs of domestic violence or abuse in our household. My parents rarely argued in front of me, and when they did disagree about something, their conversations seemed civil and respectful. My father was attentive and affectionate toward my mother in public, always holding her hand at social events and speaking about her with obvious pride and admiration. "Catherine is the most amazing woman I've ever known," he would tell his colleagues at hospital functions. "She gave up a brilliant career to support my work and raise our son, and I'm grateful every day for her sacrifice and dedication. Your wife is so elegant and gracious," people would tell me at these events. "You're lucky to have such wonderful parents." I believed them completely. My parents seemed to have the kind of marriage that other couples envied: successful, stable, loving, and built on mutual respect and shared values. My father was an involved parent who attended my soccer games and school plays, helped me with my science projects, and spent weekends teaching me to sail on Puget Sound. He was demanding about my academic performance and expected me to maintain grades in all my classes, but he was also supportive and encouraging when I struggled with difficult subjects. "Excellence is a habit, not an accident," he would tell me when I complained about the pressure to perform well in school. "The work ethic you develop now will determine your success for the rest of your life." My mother was equally involved in my education and extracurricular activities, volunteering as a room parent throughout elementary school, driving me to soccer practices and music lessons, and helping me with homework every evening after dinner. She was patient, intelligent, and always made time to listen to my problems and concerns. "Mom, do you ever regret giving up your career to stay home with me?" I asked her during one of our conversations when I was about 15 and starting to think seriously about college and career choices. "Never," she said without hesitation. Being your mother has been the most rewarding and meaningful work I've ever done. Watching you grow into the incredible young man you're becoming has been the greatest privilege of my life. But didn't you love your job in marketing? Didn't you miss the excitement and challenge of working in the business world? I loved my job, but I love being your mother more. There will always be other career opportunities, but you're only young once. I didn't want to miss any of these precious years with you. These conversations with my mother were some of my most treasured memories. She seemed genuinely happy and fulfilled in her role as a wife and mother, and I never detected any resentment or regret about the choices she had made. But what I didn't know was that my mother had become an expert at hiding her true feelings and presenting a facade of happiness, while secretly planning her own death to escape a situation that had become unbearable. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came during my senior year of high school, about 6 months before I discovered her suicide note. My mother started having what she called episodes, periods of anxiety and depression that would last for several days and leave her unable to function normally. "I think I need to see a doctor about these mood swings," she told me after spending 3 days in bed claiming she had the flu, even though she had no fever or other symptoms of illness. "Maybe you should talk to someone about stress management," I suggested. "Senior year has been really stressful for me too, with college applications and everything." "It's not just stress, honey. I think I might have some kind of chemical imbalance or hormonal problem. I've been feeling overwhelmed and sad for no apparent reason. Dad's a doctor. Why don't you ask him to refer you to someone who specializes in that kind of thing?" I've mentioned it to him, but he thinks I'm just going through a temporary phase that will pass on its own. "Maybe you should insist on seeing someone anyway. If you're not feeling well, you deserve to get help." "You're probably right. I'll make an appointment with my regular doctor and see what she recommends." But my mother never made that appointment, and her episodes became more frequent and severe throughout the spring of my senior year. She would spend entire weekends in her bedroom, claiming she was tired or not feeling well, and she gradually stopped participating in activities she had always enjoyed. "Mom, you didn't come to my last soccer game," I mentioned after our team won the regional championship. "You've never missed one of my games before." "I'm sorry, honey. I just wasn't feeling up to it that day." "Are you sure you're okay? You seem really sad lately." "I'm fine, Liam. Just going through a difficult time right now. It will pass. Is everything okay between you and Dad?" "Of course. Your father and I are fine. This has nothing to do with our marriage." "Then what's causing you to feel so depressed?" "I don't know. That's why I need to see a doctor. I think there might be something wrong with my brain chemistry." But even as my mother's mental health deteriorated throughout my senior year, she continued to function well enough to maintain the appearance of normalcy for outsiders. She still attended my graduation ceremony, helped me with college preparations, and participated in family social events when necessary. "Catherine seems a little tired lately," some of our family friends would comment, "but she's probably just emotional about Liam leaving for college." Empty nest syndrome is very common for mothers when their children go away to university, my father would explain. Catherine has devoted 18 years to being a full-time mother, and she's having some anxiety about transitioning to a new phase of life. These explanations seemed reasonable to everyone who heard them, including me. I assumed my mother was struggling with anticipatory grief about my departure for college, and that her mood would improve once she adjusted to having more time for herself and her own interests. But what I didn't understand was that my mother's depression was not about my leaving for college. It was about years of psychological, emotional, and physical abuse that my father had been inflicting on her in private while maintaining his reputation as a loving husband and devoted father. The truth came to light on a Tuesday afternoon in August, just 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave for University of Washington. I had come home early from my summer job at a local electronics store because the manager had dismissed employees early due to a power outage that had shut down our cash register system. I expected the house to be empty because my father was at the hospital, and my mother had mentioned that morning that she planned to spend the afternoon shopping and running errands. But when I walked through the front door, I could hear sounds coming from the garage. Not the mechanical sounds of my father working on his car, but the quiet sounds of someone moving around and occasionally crying. I found my mother sitting at my father's workbench in the garage, writing what appeared to be a letter in her careful handwriting. There were tears streaming down her face, and she was so absorbed in what she was writing that she didn't notice me standing in the doorway. "Mom," I said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up with an expression of shock and panic, quickly trying to cover the papers she had been writing with her hands. "Liam, I didn't expect you home so early. The power went out at work, so they sent us home. What are you doing?" "Just writing some notes. Personal things. Are you okay? You look like you've been crying." "I'm fine, honey. Just feeling a little emotional today." But something about her demeanor seemed wrong. She was more agitated and nervous than I had ever seen her, and she was obviously trying to hide whatever she had been writing. "Mom, what kind of notes are you writing?" "Nothing important. Just some thoughts I wanted to get down on paper." "Can I see?" "No, Liam. These are private thoughts." "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with some internal conflict about whether to tell me the truth or continue hiding whatever was bothering her. "Liam, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "I need you to promise that no matter what happens, you'll remember that I love you more than anything in the world." "Mom, you're really scaring me now. What do you mean, no matter what happens?" "Just promise me." "I promise. But I don't understand why you're talking like this. And I need you to promise that you'll go to college and build a good life for yourself, no matter what happens with our family." "What's going to happen with our family?" "I don't know, but I need to know that you'll be okay." "Mom, please tell me what's wrong. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." She was quiet for several minutes, looking at the papers she had been writing, then at me, then back at the papers. "Liam, there are things about our family that you don't know, things that I've tried to protect you from." "What kind of things?" "Things about your father and our marriage." "I don't understand." "Your father, he's not the man you think he is. He's not the man anyone thinks he is." "What do you mean?" "He hurts me, Liam. He has been hurting me for almost 20 years. I stared at her in confusion. "Hurts you how?" "In every way you can imagine. Physically, emotionally, psychologically. He controls every aspect of my life, and when I don't do exactly what he wants, he punishes me." "Mom, that can't be true. I've never seen Dad hurt you. He's very careful to make sure you never see it. Everything you've witnessed has been a performance designed to hide what really happens when we're alone. But you guys seem so happy together. You never fight in front of me. Because I've learned not to disagree with him about anything when you're around. I've learned to be the perfect wife and mother in public, while hiding the bruises and the fear in private." I felt like the world was tilting sideways. Nothing my mother was saying made sense based on my experience of our family life. "Mom, if Dad has been hurting you, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you ever call the police or get help?" "Because I was afraid of what he would do to you if I tried to leave or report him. He's threatened to hurt you if I ever try to expose him." "He threatened to hurt me?" "Many times. He's told me that if I ever try to leave him or tell anyone about the abuse, he'll make sure something happens to you. He's a respected doctor with connections throughout the medical community and the police department. He could easily arrange for you to have an accident, that would look completely natural. Mom, this sounds like paranoid thinking. Dad would never hurt me. Liam, your father is capable of things you can't imagine. The man you know as your loving, devoted father is a carefully constructed facade. The real Marcus Davis is a monster who has made my life a living hell for almost 2 decades. Then, why haven't you left him? Because I've been trapped. I have no money of my own, no career to fall back on, no family support system. And most importantly, I couldn't leave you alone with him. But I'm 18 now. I'm going to college in 3 weeks. I know, and that's why. She gestured toward the papers she had been writing. Mom, what are those papers? She was quiet for a long time before answering. They're letters. To you, to my sister, to a few close friends. Explaining everything. Explaining everything about what? About why I can't continue living this way. About what your father has done to me. About why I've decided to end my suffering. The words hit me like a physical blow. Mom, are you talking about suicide? I can't live with this anymore, Liam. I've tried for 20 years to find a way to escape, but there is no escape. He'll never let me go, and I can't spend the rest of my life being his victim. Mom, no. You can't do this. We can find another way. There is no other way. I've thought about this for months, and I've exhausted every option. What about therapy? What about divorce? What about getting help from domestic violence organizations? Your father would never allow me to get therapy or file for divorce. And domestic violence organizations can't protect me from someone with his resources and connections. Then we'll go to the police together. We'll report what he's done to you. With what evidence? He's been very careful never to leave marks that would be visible to others. And even if I could prove the physical abuse, who's going to believe that Dr. Marcus Davis, respected surgeon and pillar of the community, is a domestic abuser? I'll believe you. I'll support you. We'll figure this out together. Liam, you're 18 years old. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your future to help me escape my mistakes. They're not your mistakes, Mom. And you're not escaping anything by killing yourself. You're just letting him win. I'm ending my suffering and destroying my life in the process. Do you think I could ever be happy knowing that you killed yourself because I wasn't strong enough or smart enough to help you find another solution? My mother started crying harder, and I could see that she was torn between her desire to escape her situation and her love for me. Liam, I've been planning this for months. I have everything figured out. I've written letters explaining everything, including detailed documentation of the abuse your father has inflicted on me over the years. What kind of documentation? Photos of injuries he's given me, copies of medical records from times when I've been treated for accidents that were actually assaults, recordings of him threatening me, financial records showing how he's controlled every aspect of my economic life. Mom, if you have all that evidence, we can use it to get him arrested and prosecuted. That evidence was meant to be found after my death, to ensure that people would understand why I couldn't continue living. It can serve the same purpose while you're alive. We can use it to build a case against him and get you the protection and help you need. Liam, you don't understand how powerful and well-connected your father is. Even with evidence, there's no guarantee that anyone would believe me or take action against him. Then we'll make them believe you. We'll find lawyers and advocates who specialize in domestic violence cases. We'll contact journalists who investigate abuse by prominent people. We'll do whatever it takes to expose him and get you justice. And what if none of that works? What if he retaliates against you for helping me? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Mom, I'd rather face whatever consequences come from fighting back than live with the knowledge that I let you kill yourself because I was too scared to help you. This isn't your responsibility, Liam. Yes, it is. You're my mother, and I love you. Protecting you from the person who's been hurting you is absolutely my responsibility. You're just a kid. I'm 18 years old, legally an adult. And even if I were still a kid, I wouldn't let anyone hurt you if I could prevent it. Liam, if we try to fight your father and we lose, the consequences could be devastating for both of us. The consequences of doing nothing are guaranteed to be devastating. At least if we fight back, there's a chance we can win. What if he hurts you? What if he's been planning to hurt me anyway? You said he's threatened to hurt me if you tried to leave. Maybe the only way to protect both of us is to expose him before he can follow through on those threats. My mother was quiet for a long time, looking at the suicide letters she had been writing, then at me, then back at the letters. I don't know if I have the strength to go through a legal battle with your father. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. Liam, you're supposed to start college in 3 weeks. I can't ask you to postpone your education to help me deal with my problems. You're not asking me to do anything. I'm telling you that I'm going to help you whether you want me to or not, and college can wait a semester if necessary. Your father will be furious if he finds out what we're planning. Dad can be as furious as he wants. He's going to be in jail. You really think we can do this? I think we have to try. The alternative is unacceptable. What's the first step? The first step is getting you somewhere safe while we organize the evidence and contact the authorities. Where would I go? Do you have friends or family members who would let you stay with them temporarily? My sister lives in Portland. She's been asking me for years why I seem so distant and unhappy. She might help if I finally told her the truth. Then we'll call her today and explain the situation. What about your father? He'll notice if I'm not here when he gets home from work. We'll figure out what to tell him. Maybe you can say you're visiting your sister for a few days to help her with something. He won't like that. He doesn't like me traveling without him. Mom, in a few hours, what he likes or doesn't like isn't going to matter anymore. We're going to call the police and report him for domestic violence. Today, as soon as we get you somewhere safe and organize the evidence you've collected. Liam, are you sure about this? Once we make that phone call, there's no going back. I'm sure. Are you sure? She looked at her suicide letters one more time, then tore them up. Yes, I'm sure. The next several hours were the most intense and frightening of my life. My mother called her sister, Janet, in Portland and explained the situation. Janet was shocked and horrified to learn what had been happening, but she immediately offered to drive to Seattle to pick up my mother and provide her with a safe place to stay. Catherine, I knew something was wrong, Janet said during their phone conversation, which I listened to on speaker. You've seemed so withdrawn and anxious for years, but whenever I asked about it, you said everything was fine. I was ashamed and afraid. Marcus convinced me that no one would believe me if I told them what he was really like. How long has this been going on? Almost since the beginning of our marriage. It started with emotional abuse and controlling behavior, then escalated to physical violence over the years. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because he threatened to hurt Liam if I told anyone, and because I was embarrassed that I had let myself become trapped in this situation. You didn't let yourself become trapped. He trapped you through manipulation and fear. I know that now, but for years, I believed that I must have done something to deserve the way he treated me. Catherine, no one deserves to be abused, and no one should have to live in fear of the person who's supposed to love and protect them. I'm scared about what's going to happen when we report him to the police. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone. I'll be there to support you, and it sounds like Liam is going to support you too. Liam is being incredibly brave and mature about this. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't found me today. You have a wonderful son, and he has a wonderful mother. You both deserve so much better than what Marcus has put you through. While my mother was talking to Janet, I was organizing the evidence she had collected over the years. What I found was devastating and overwhelming. Hundreds of photographs showing bruises, cuts, and other injuries that my father had inflicted on her, along with detailed written records of specific incidents of abuse. The photographs were dated and documented with descriptions of what had caused each injury. Some showed minor bruises on her arms and legs. Others showed more serious injuries: black eyes, split lips, finger marks on her throat from being choked. Mom, some of these photos show really serious injuries, I said while reviewing the evidence. How did you hide all of this from me? Makeup, long sleeves, careful timing. I became an expert at concealing bruises and making excuses for why I couldn't participate in activities where people might see the injuries. This photo shows finger marks on your neck. When did this happen? 2 months ago. Your father was angry because I had forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning, and he choked me until I almost passed out. Where was I when this happened? You were at work. He's always been careful to make sure you weren't around when he got violent. How many times has he choked you? Too many to count. Choking is his favorite method of punishment because it doesn't leave visible marks if he's careful about how long he applies pressure. I felt sick to my stomach as I reviewed the evidence of years of abuse that had been happening in my own house without my knowledge. Mom, why didn't you ever go to the hospital for any of these injuries? I went to the emergency room 3 times over the years, but I always told them I had fallen or been in an accident. Marcus coached me on what to say, and since he's a respected doctor, no one questioned my explanations. Do you have copies of those medical records? Yes. I requested copies of all my medical records from the past 10 years and highlighted the visits that were actually related to domestic violence. What about the recordings you mentioned? Did you actually record him threatening you? I have dozens of recordings on my phone of him threatening to hurt me, hurt you, or destroy my life if I ever tried to leave him. Can I hear some of them? My mother played several of the recordings, and listening to my father's voice as he threatened and intimidated her was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. The man on those recordings sounded nothing like the loving father I knew. He sounded like a predator who enjoyed having complete control over his victim. Catherine, if you ever try to leave me or tell anyone about our private business, I will destroy you, my father's voice said on one of the recordings. I will make sure you end up homeless and penniless, and I will make sure something happens to Liam that will haunt you for the rest of your life. You think anyone will believe you over me? I'm a respected surgeon with an impeccable reputation. You're a housewife with no education, no career, and no credibility. If you try to accuse me of anything, I'll have you committed to a psychiatric hospital for delusional thinking. I own you, Catherine. I own this house. I own the cars. I own the bank accounts, and I own you. You exist because I allow you to exist. Never forget that. Listening to these recordings, I finally understood why my mother had felt trapped and hopeless. My father had systematically destroyed her self-confidence and convinced her that she had no options except to endure his abuse. Mom, these recordings are incredibly damaging evidence. Any jury that hears them will understand exactly what kind of person Dad really is. I hope so, but I'm still scared that his reputation and connections will protect him. They won't, not with this kind of evidence. By late afternoon, we had organized all of the evidence into a comprehensive package that documented nearly 20 years of domestic violence. Janet had arrived from Portland and was waiting in a hotel near our house while we finished our preparations. Liam, I need to ask you one more time if you're sure about this, my mother said as we prepared to leave the house together. Once we call the police, your father will know that you helped me. There's no way to protect you from his anger. Mom, I'm not worried about his anger. I'm worried about your safety. And the longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes for both of us. What if he tries to hurt you when he finds out what we've done? He's going to be in jail. He won't have the opportunity to hurt anyone. What if the police don't arrest him immediately? What if they investigate for weeks or months before taking action? Then we'll make sure you're somewhere safe until he's arrested. I'm scared, Liam. I'm scared too, but we're doing the right thing. Are you sure? I'm sure. Are you ready? I'm ready. We drove to the police station together, with my mother carrying a suitcase of evidence, and me carrying printed copies of all the recordings and photographs she had collected. I had never been inside a police station before, and I was nervous about how the officers would respond to our allegations against a prominent surgeon. If you're starting to realize that sometimes the people who seem perfect in public are hiding unimaginable darkness in private, then you'll want to hear how we exposed years of carefully concealed abuse. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is shatter the illusion that's protecting a predator, even when that predator is your own father. Subscribe, because what happens next will show you that the truth always comes out, but only when someone is courageous enough to speak it. Detective Sarah Rodriguez was the domestic violence specialist who was assigned to our case. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put my mother at ease. Mrs. Davis, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, Detective Rodriguez said as we sat in her office reviewing the evidence. It takes tremendous courage to report domestic violence, especially when the abuser is someone with power and status in the community. I'm terrified, my mother admitted. My husband has convinced me for years that no one would believe me if I tried to report him. Mrs. Davis, I've been investigating domestic violence cases for 12 years, and I can tell you that the evidence you've provided is some of the most comprehensive documentation I've ever seen. Your husband's threats and manipulation were designed to keep you silent, but they were also completely false. We absolutely believe you, and we're going to take immediate action to protect you. What kind of action? First, we're going to obtain an emergency protective order that will prevent your husband from contacting you or coming near you. Then, we're going to issue a warrant for his arrest on multiple charges of domestic violence, assault, and criminal threats. How long will that take? We can have the protective order within a few hours. The arrest warrant will probably be ready by tomorrow morning. What should I do in the meantime? You should stay somewhere safe, where your husband cannot find you. Do you have a place to go? My sister is waiting for me at a hotel. We're planning to drive to Portland tonight. That's a good plan. I would recommend staying out of Washington State until we have your husband in custody. Detective Rodriguez, I said, what are the chances that my father will be convicted based on this evidence? Based on what I've seen so far, I would say the chances are very good. Your mother has documented years of abuse with photographs, medical records, and audio recordings. This is exactly the kind of evidence that prosecutors need to build strong domestic violence cases. How long could he go to prison? With multiple charges spanning many years, he could be looking at 15 to 20 years in prison. Will my mother have to testify at his trial? Yes, she'll be the primary witness, but we have victim advocates who will help prepare her for that experience and provide support throughout the legal process. What about retaliation? What if he tries to hurt her from jail? The protective order will remain in effect throughout the legal proceedings, and we'll monitor any attempts at contact or intimidation. If he violates the order, he'll face additional charges. After we finished giving our statements to Detective Rodriguez, my mother and I drove to the hotel where Janet was waiting. The three of us had dinner together. the first meal my mother had eaten in months without fear of triggering my father's anger. "Catherine, you look different already," Janet observed. "More relaxed. More like the sister I remember from before you got married." "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in 20 years, my mother said. "I still can't believe we actually did it." "What happens now?" Janet asked. "Now we wait for the police to arrest Marcus, and then we start rebuilding Catherine's life," I said. "Liam, you've been incredibly brave today," Janet said. "Most 18-year-olds wouldn't have the maturity or courage to handle a situation like this. I couldn't let my mom kill herself because of what he was doing to her. You saved her life today. You both should be proud of yourselves." We drove to Portland that evening, and I spent the night at Janet's house while my mother slept peacefully for the first time in years. The next morning, Detective Rodriguez called to inform us that my father had been arrested at the hospital where he was scheduled to perform surgery. Dr. Davis was taken into custody at 6:30 this morning, Detective Rodriguez told us. He's being held without bail pending his arraignment. "How did he react when he was arrested?" my mother asked. "According to the officers who arrested him, he was shocked and denied all the allegations. He claimed that you were mentally unstable and that the evidence had been fabricated." "That's exactly what I expected him to say. Mrs. Davis, his denials are irrelevant given the strength of the evidence you provided. This case is going to trial, and we're confident about the outcome." "What happens next?" "There will be an arraignment hearing next week, where formal charges will be read and bail will be set. You'll need to return to Seattle for that hearing, but we'll provide protection and support throughout the process." The news of my father's arrest sent shockwaves through our community and his professional circles. Dr. Marcus Davis, respected surgeon and pillar of society, was facing multiple felony charges for domestic violence against his wife of 20 years. "I can't believe this is true," one of his colleagues told a reporter from the Seattle Times. "Marcus has always seemed like such a devoted family man. This must be some kind of misunderstanding. I've worked with Dr. Davis for 10 years, and I've never seen any signs of violent behavior," said another colleague. "He's always been professional and respectful in all of his interactions." But the evidence was overwhelming, and as more details became public, people who had known our family for years started remembering signs they had missed or ignored. Catherine did seem withdrawn and anxious at social events. One of our neighbors told the same reporter, and she often had bruises that she said were from accidents or clumsiness. I never thought to question her explanations. "Looking back, there were definitely red flags," said one of my mother's former friends. "Marcus was very controlling about Catherine's social activities, and she gradually stopped participating in things she used to enjoy. But he was so charming and successful that we assumed their marriage was fine." The trial took place 6 months later, and it was one of the most emotionally difficult experiences my mother and I had ever endured. Sitting in a courtroom, while prosecutors detailed 20 years of abuse, while defense attorneys tried to portray my mother as mentally unstable and vindictive, and while my father sat at the defendant's table glaring at us with hatred and resentment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," prosecutor Jennifer Martinez said during her opening statement, "this case is about power, control, and a 20-year campaign of terror that Dr. Marcus Davis inflicted on his wife, Catherine. The evidence will show that behind his public facade as a respected surgeon and family man, Dr. Davis was a predator who used his intelligence, resources, and reputation to trap his wife in a cycle of abuse that nearly led to her suicide. The defense will try to convince you that Mrs. Davis is lying, that she fabricated evidence, that she's seeking revenge against a successful husband. But the evidence speaks for itself. Hundreds of photographs documenting injuries, medical records from emergency room visits, audio recordings of threats and intimidation, and the testimony of a woman who finally found the courage to tell the truth about her nightmare. My mother's testimony was the most powerful moment of the trial. For 3 days, she described in detail the abuse she had endured, the fear she had lived with, and the systematic destruction of her self-confidence and independence. Mrs. Davis, Prosecutor Martinez asked, "Why did you stay in this marriage for 20 years if the abuse was as severe as you've described?" "Because I was afraid," my mother answered. "My husband convinced me that no one would believe me if I tried to report him. He told me that he would destroy my life and hurt my son if I ever tried to leave. He controlled every aspect of my existence. My access to money, my social contacts, my daily activities. I felt completely trapped." "What finally gave you the courage to come forward?" "My son found me writing suicide letters. I had decided that ending my life was the only way to escape the abuse. But Liam refused to let me give up. He convinced me that we could fight back and win." "How do you feel about your decision to report your husband's abuse?" "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. For 20 years, I let fear control my life. Now I'm finally free." The defense attorney, Robert Morrison, tried to discredit my mother's testimony by suggesting that she was mentally unstable and seeking financial gain through the divorce proceedings. "Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you've been treated for depression and anxiety?" Morrison asked during cross-examination. "Yes, because living with abuse for 20 years caused severe psychological trauma." "Isn't it true that you stand to gain millions of dollars in assets if your husband is convicted and you divorce him?" "I didn't report my husband for financial gain. I reported him because he was slowly killing me through years of abuse." "But you admit that you'll benefit financially from his conviction?" "I admit that I'll finally have access to resources I need to rebuild my life after 20 years of being financially controlled and manipulated." "Isn't it possible that you fabricated this evidence to justify taking half of your husband's assets?" "No. Every piece of evidence is real. Every photograph shows real injuries he inflicted on me. Every recording captures real threats he made against me and my son. When I testified about finding my mother's suicide letters and helping her report the abuse, I tried to convey the urgency and desperation of that moment." "Liam," Prosecutor Martinez asked, "what went through your mind when you realized your mother was planning to kill herself?" "I felt like my whole world was collapsing. I couldn't understand how someone who seemed so happy and successful could be so desperate that death felt like her only option." "What convinced you that her allegations against your father were true?" "The evidence she showed me. The photographs, the recordings, the detailed documentation of years of abuse. But also the way she looked when she told me the truth, relieved to finally stop pretending, but terrified about what would happen next." "Why did you decide to help her report the abuse rather than trying to handle it privately within the family?" "Because private family discussions don't stop someone from committing felonies. My father had been committing crimes against my mother for 20 years, and he needed to face legal consequences for his actions." "Were you afraid of how your father would react when he learned that you had helped your mother?" "Yes. But I was more afraid of what would happen to my mother if I didn't help her. She was planning to kill herself because she saw no other way to escape. I couldn't live with myself if I had let that happen." The defense tried to portray me as a confused teenager who had been manipulated by his mother into believing false allegations against his father. "Liam, isn't it true that you were planning to attend college out of state and had limited contact with your parents during your senior year of high school?" Morrison asked during cross-examination. "I had normal contact with my parents. I lived at home and saw them every day. But you admit that you never witnessed any of the alleged abuse your mother claims to have suffered? My father was careful to make sure I never witnessed his abuse directly, but looking back, there were signs that I should have recognized. What kind of signs? My mother's increasing depression and withdrawal, her unexplained injuries that she attributed to accidents, her fear of disappointing my father or disagreeing with him about anything. But you admit that at the time, you didn't interpret these as signs of abuse? No, because I trusted my father and believed his explanations. I thought we had a normal, happy family. So you're asking the jury to believe that your father successfully hid 20 years of abuse from his own son? I'm asking the jury to listen to the evidence. The photographs, the recordings, the medical records. That evidence speaks for itself. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Multiple counts of domestic violence, assault, criminal threats, and unlawful imprisonment. When the verdicts were read, my mother collapsed in tears of relief, and I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. My father showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs, but he turned to look at my mother and me one final time with an expression of pure hatred. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced my father to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. She also issued a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting my mother or me for the rest of his life. Dr. Davis, Judge Williams said during the sentencing hearing, you used your education, your resources, and your reputation to trap your wife in a cycle of abuse that lasted for 20 years. You betrayed your oath as a physician to do no harm by systematically harming the person who should have been able to trust you most. Your actions were not only criminal, but morally reprehensible. The evidence in this case shows that you are a predator who enjoyed having complete control over another human being. You used fear, intimidation, and violence to maintain that control, and you came dangerously close to driving your victim to suicide. Your son showed more courage and integrity at age 18 than you have shown in your entire adult life. He saved his mother's life by refusing to enable your abuse and by insisting that you face consequences for your crimes. I am sentencing you to 15 years in prison, and I hope you use that time to reflect on the damage you have caused and the lives you have destroyed. The months following my father's conviction were a period of healing and rebuilding for my mother and me. I deferred my enrollment at University of Washington for a year to help my mother through the divorce proceedings and the process of establishing her independence after 20 years of being controlled. Liam, you don't need to postpone college to take care of me. My mother told me during one of our conversations about my future plans. I'm stronger now than I've been in 20 years. I know you're strong, but I want to make sure you're completely stable and safe before I move away. I appreciate that, but I also want you to build your own life. You've already sacrificed enough to help me escape your father's abuse. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was the right thing to do. Even so, you're 18 years old, and you deserve to experience college and independence without worrying about your mother's problems. You're not a problem, Mom. You're my family, and family takes care of each other. Family also supports each other's dreams and goals. Your dream has always been to study psychology and help other families work through their problems. That dream hasn't changed. If anything, this experience has made me more committed to working with families affected by domestic violence. During that year, my mother received counseling to help her process 20 years of trauma and develop the confidence and skills she needed to live independently. She also started volunteering with a local domestic violence shelter, sharing her story with other survivors and helping them understand their options for escape and recovery. Working with other survivors has been incredibly healing for me, she told me after several months of volunteer work. For so long, I felt isolated and ashamed. Now I understand that domestic violence is much more common than most people realize, and that none of us should feel ashamed about what was done to us. How do the other women respond when you tell them about your experience? They're amazed that someone from what appeared to be such a privileged background could experience the same kind of abuse they've endured. It helps them understand that domestic violence crosses all social and economic boundaries. Do you think your story helps them find the courage to leave their abusers? I hope so. I try to show them that escape is possible, even from situations that seem hopeless. I also used that year to volunteer with organizations that provided services to domestic violence survivors and their children. Working with teenagers whose families had been affected by abuse gave me valuable experience and confirmed my decision to study psychology with a focus on family trauma and recovery. Liam, you have natural instincts for this work. Dr. Michael Chun, the clinical director of the Family Recovery Center, told me after I had been volunteering for several months. The teenagers you work with respond well to you because they can tell that you genuinely understand what they've been through. I understand because I lived through it myself, even though I didn't realize it at the time. That experience gives you credibility and empathy that can't be taught in textbooks. I hope to use that experience to help other families before they reach the crisis point that my family reached. Based on what I've observed, I think you'll be very successful in this field. When I finally started college at University of Washington the following fall, I was more focused and motivated than I had ever been. My psychology courses took on personal meaning as I learned about the dynamics of abusive relationships, the psychological effects of long-term trauma, and evidence-based treatments for domestic violence survivors. Jordan, your papers on family trauma show unusual insight and sophistication for an undergraduate student. Dr. Sarah Martinez, my abnormal psychology professor, told me during office hours, "Have you considered pursuing graduate studies in clinical psychology?" Yes, that's my plan. I want to become a licensed therapist who specializes in working with domestic violence survivors and their families. What drew you to this field? Personal experience. My family was affected by domestic violence, and I've seen firsthand how effective intervention can save lives. That's a powerful motivation. Students who have personal connections to their field of study often become the most dedicated and effective practitioners. During my sophomore year, I started an organization called Students Against Family Violence, which provided education and resources about domestic abuse to university students and high school students throughout Washington state. Many young people don't recognize the signs of abusive relationships because they haven't been educated about the warning signs, I explained during our organization's first campus presentation. They assume that domestic violence only happens to certain types of people or in certain types of families. But the reality is that abuse can happen to anyone. The most important message we want to share is that help is available, escape is possible, and no one should have to live in fear of someone who claims to love them. The organization grew rapidly and began receiving invitations to speak at high schools, community centers, and other universities throughout the Pacific Northwest. Liam's presentation potentially saved my life. One high school student wrote in an evaluation form after attending one of our programs, "I didn't realize that my boyfriend's controlling behavior was actually emotional abuse. The information I learned helped me recognize that I needed to end the relationship before it escalated to physical violence. I wish I had heard this presentation before I got married," wrote another attendee. "My husband has been isolating me from my friends and family, and I thought that was normal. Now I understand that isolation is one of the tactics abusers use to control their victims. During my junior year, my mother remarried a man named Robert Kim, a gentle and supportive social worker who had also survived an abusive first marriage. Their relationship was based on mutual respect, open communication, and shared values about treating each other with kindness and dignity. Watching your mother in a healthy relationship has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, I told Robert during one of our conversations about family dynamics. For 20 years, I thought the way my father treated her was normal. Now I can see what a loving partnership actually looks like. Your mother is an incredible woman who deserves to be cherished and respected, Robert replied. I'm grateful every day that she survived her first marriage and was brave enough to trust someone new. Do you think she's fully recovered from the trauma of her abuse? Recovery is an ongoing process, not a destination. But yes, she's made remarkable progress. She's confident, independent, and no longer afraid to express her opinions or pursue her own interests. What advice would you give to other domestic violence survivors who are afraid to leave their abusers? I would tell them that escape is possible, healing is possible, and healthy relationships are possible. It takes courage and support, but millions of people have successfully left abusive situations and rebuilt their lives. My father was released from prison after serving 12 years of his 15-year sentence. He was required to register as a domestic violence offender and was prohibited from contacting my mother or me under the terms of his permanent restraining order. Liam, I need to tell you that your father has been released. My mother informed me during a phone call to my graduate school apartment. I wanted you to hear it from me rather than finding out some other way. How do you feel about his release? Nervous, but not terrified the way I thought I would be. I'm a different person now than I was when he was arrested. I'm stronger, I have support systems, and I know my rights. Do you think he'll try to contact you? I hope not. He knows that violating the restraining order would send him back to prison immediately. What will you do if he does try to contact you? I'll report it to the police immediately. I spent 20 years being afraid of him, and I'm not going to waste any more of my life on fear. I'm proud of how strong you've become. I'm proud of the man you've become. You saved my life when I couldn't save myself, and you've turned your experience into a mission to help other families. I graduated from University of Washington with a doctorate in clinical psychology, specializing in trauma therapy and family systems. My dissertation research focused on the effectiveness of early intervention programs in preventing domestic violence, and it was published in the Journal of Family Violence. Dr. Davis, my dissertation advisor, said during my defense, "Your research has the potential to change how we approach domestic violence prevention." The data clearly shows that education and early intervention can dramatically reduce the incidence of abuse in intimate relationships. Thank you. This research is deeply personal for me, and I hope it will help other families avoid the trauma that my family experienced. What are your plans after graduation? I'm opening a private practice that specializes in working with domestic violence survivors and their children. I'm also continuing my advocacy work through speaking engagements and educational programs. Today, I am 29 years old and have been working as a licensed clinical psychologist for 5 years. My practice, Davis Family Therapy Associates, provides counseling services to domestic violence survivors, their children, and families in recovery from trauma. Dr. Davis, you've helped me understand that my father's abuse wasn't my fault. One of my teenage clients told me during a recent session. I spent years thinking that if I had been a better son, he wouldn't have hurt my mother. Children are never responsible for their parents' choices, I told him. Your father chose to be abusive, and that choice had nothing to do with your behavior. How did you learn to stop blaming yourself for what happened in your family? It took years of therapy and education for me to understand that I was a victim of my father's abuse just as much as my mother was. Even though he never hit me directly, living with the fear and secrecy affected my mental health and my understanding of normal relationships. Do you think I'll ever be able to have a healthy relationship? Absolutely. Understanding the dynamics of abuse actually gives you an advantage in recognizing healthy relationship patterns. You know what to avoid and what to look for in a partner. My mother continues to work as an advocate for domestic violence survivors and has become a nationally recognized speaker on the topic of escaping long-term abusive relationships. Catherine Davis is living proof that it's never too late to leave an abusive situation and rebuild your life, wrote People magazine in a feature story about her advocacy work. Her courage in reporting her husband's abuse and her dedication to helping other survivors have made her a hero in the domestic violence prevention community. My father has never attempted to contact my mother or me since his release from prison. We heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to another state and was working in a non-medical field because his license to practice medicine had been permanently revoked. I don't hate him, my mother told me during a recent conversation about forgiveness and healing. I pity him. He threw away a successful career, a loving family, and his reputation because he couldn't control his need to dominate and hurt other people. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that day in the garage? I try not to think about that, but I know that if you hadn't intervened, I wouldn't be here today. You saved my life in every way that matters. You saved your own life by having the courage to tell the truth and fight back. We saved each other, and now we get to use our experience to help other families before they reach the same crisis point we reached. Looking back on that 18-year-old boy who found his mother writing suicide letters and convinced her to report 20 years of hidden abuse, I'm proud of the choice he made to prioritize truth over family loyalty and justice over comfortable denial. Discovering that my father was a predator who had been terrorizing my mother for 20 years was devastating, but it was also liberating. It freed my mother from a life of fear and gave both of us the opportunity to build authentic relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. The most important lesson I learned from our experience, I tell audiences when I speak about domestic violence prevention, is that keeping family secrets doesn't protect families, it protects abusers. The only way to stop abuse is to expose it and hold abusers accountable for their actions. If you suspect that someone you know is being abused, speak up. If you are being abused yourself, reach out for help. There are people who will believe you, support you, and help you find safety. Most importantly, remember that abuse is never your fault. Escape is always possible, and healing can happen at any age. It's never too late to choose truth over secrecy, safety over familiarity, and hope over despair. If you are in an abusive situation, or if you know someone who might be experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233. There are trained advocates who can provide information, support, and safety planning assistance. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to keep someone else's secret when that secret is destroying lives. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is shatter an illusion that's protecting a predator. Sometimes growing up means learning that perfect families don't exist, but healthy families are always possible when people choose honesty, respect, and accountability over image, control, and fear. Thank you for listening to my story of growing up faster than I ever wanted to. I've left 2 more stories on your screen, both from young men who learned that sometimes becoming an adult doesn't happen at 18. It happens the moment your family needs you to be strong. Click on whichever one speaks to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it's like to be forced to grow up overnight, that notification bell is waiting. Until tomorrow, remember, age is just a number, but courage defines who you really are.